writer for Real Clear Investigations. Also, our panel is back, Joe DeGenova and Victoria Tunzing. So, Mark, I want to start with you. We thank you all for joining us again. But what do you make of the New York Times possibly using information from partisan Democrats and presenting it as official law enforcement details?
Yeah, I mean, what happened on January 6th was outrageous, and people involved should be punished to the full extent of the law. But that doesn't mean that you get to, make up facts because you're outraged by what happened. And there's definitely been a concerted effort to, make what happened on January 6th out to be possibly worse than it is, because there's, political benefit for the Democratic Party. I also think it's, instructive that this correction happened basically as the impeachment trial was ending. I mean, certainly if, these are facts that would have, harmed the case the Democrats were making about the consequences of the riots in Congress, for sure.
Right. We're just seeing this retraction. President Trump already acquitted, so it doesn't affect it now. Joe, Victoria, your thoughts?
Well, let me just say, you err. You really do. You called it a retraction. Did the New York Times ever call it a retraction? They call it update.
An update.
Boy, talk about a euphemism. How embarrassing. There's one silver lining, that by blaming the Republicans and Trump for his death, the Democrats finally honored a police officer.
Right.
I think that the answer to this horrible question of why the New York Times accepted a lie from unreliable sources is that they didn't care. They wanted the narrative to be exactly what they printed in the first story. And they have buried the retraction under this awful term update. I didn't know that was in the lexicon of newspapers. It's not an update. It's a complete reversal of what they reported. It's so embarrassing. The old gray lady is now a streetwalker. And believe me, this is not a newspaper of record any longer. It's not all the news that's fit to print. It's all the news that fits we print.
Victoria, touching on what you said, while people did, of course, want to honor Brian Sicknick's life, Officer Sicknick's life, it was frustrating to see that all of a sudden we were allowed to vocalize that and support that. But Mark, I want to go back to you. You wrote this article explaining that President Biden owes his victory in this past election to the Democrats and the mainstream media for, during the first impeachment trial of former President Trump, in addition to shielding him from scrutiny of his family's business affairs. Can you explain and elaborate a bit more on that to us?
Well, yeah, I mean, it has a lot of pertinence to what just happened with the second impeachment, because that was such an outrageous process that they went through. With the exception of the first witness in the House impeachment trial, every witness in the House impeachment trial was deposed in secret in such a manner that Republicans could not discuss what was said when they questioned these people without facing ethics charges. And I think that so poisoned the well in terms of the process, in terms of what people, expect from impeachment, which is supposed to be one of our most solemn constitutional mechanisms for holding democratically accountable leaders accountable. And in this case, the reason why they had so much secrecy was because they had to protect Joe Biden. The charges, which I don't know how many viewers even remember the charges, that were brought up in the first impeachment, but because it involved Ukraine and Trump asking for an investigation of Joe Biden, the Democrats had to do everything in secret, because an obvious defense of Trump would have been to, ask questions about the legitimacy of the corruption charges against Joe Biden and his family. So the Democrats had to go out of their way to have an impeachment process where no one was allowed to ask about Joe Biden's corruption. And I think in doing so, they made it look like, any inquiry into Joe Biden's corruption was, off the table for the campaign that quickly followed when the impeachment ended at the beginning of 2020.
Interesting. Mark Hemingway, thank you for joining us. Joe and Victoria, stick around. We'll be back with you in just a minute.
All right, you guys remember this.